We have to be careful when we talk about our REFRAD board, and REFRAD stands for Release from Active Duty, because at the same time we're having a REFRAD board, the active component is having what they call the SIRT board, but that's because they're drawing down. We as a force are not drawing down, but we are trying to shape our force. So in 2010, the Army Reserve decided we wanted to make some change in how we manage our officer force. So we went to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs and asked for the authority to do a couple of things. One was to manage our officers to mandatory removal date, because prior to that our officers were separated when they reached 20 years active federal service. And we also asked to have our AGR officers and our non-AGR officers considered for promotion in separate competitive categories. And when we did that, we said, okay, what's going to happen if these officers, now that they can stay to mandatory removal day, if everybody chooses to do that? We need to have some sort of forcing mechanism that incentivizes officers to maybe retire or to continue to take hard jobs. And that initiative is the REFRAD Board. So we went to ASMNRA and got the authority to conduct a REFRAD Board. And that REFRAD Board allows us to shape the population, and it allows for us to separate officers at a particular grade so that junior officers have room to move up. And for this year's board, we will be considering lieutenant colonels and colonels. The grade could change every year. We take this board very seriously because we understand that the impact it's going to have on officers' lives and their families. So what we do is every year we have our ORSAs, our numbers guys, to run the numbers and see where we need shaping. But what we don't want to do is react to every year. So we operate off of a 5-year plan, a model that tells us how many officers will retire or eligible to retire, who reach mandatory removal date, and then just projection numbers that show how many are coming and going. And then we create our REFRAD numbers based on the numbers that are going to get promoted into a certain grade and promoted out of a certain grade. Sometimes, and we make lieutenant colonel, we make colonel, there isn't an incentive to say, keep taking a hard job because you've pretty much topped out of your career. So we have a large number of officers who say that, then how are we going to promote our majors? We have some great majors and great lieutenant colonels out there. We want to give them opportunity to get promoted. And we can do that by saying to officers who may have been in quite a number of time, okay, it's time to move on and that doesn't mean that these officers haven't had great careers. A lot of these officers, most of these officers have had great careers. It's just time for us to shape the number down. The board does not look at branch or function area, and the main reason is because in Army Reserve, we don't promote that way. We promote in the aggregates, and we don't manage that way. So because we don't manage that way, we really can't say to a board, promote only the infantry officers that we need, because we really have no requirements for infantry officers for most combat arms. As you know, in Army Reserve, we don't have those type requirements. So because we have so many officers who have served their entire career in branch and material positions, then we promote, manage, and of course REFRAD in the aggregate and not based on branch or functional area. We will say to a board, this board will be just like any other board that we have, command board, senior service school board, promotion boards. We say to board members, look at these offers and based on their experience, and what I would say to most officers is evaluations matter most. What jobs have they had and how did they perform at those jobs? You can look at the REFRAD board as the opposite of promotion board. Promotion board takes the top, however number we set. If we set it 100, promotion board takes the top 100 and they promote those top 100. If we say REFRAD board, promotion board is going to take the bottom 100. Not that we're going to set a select objective of 100, but if it were 100, they would take the bottom 100 and say, okay, bottom 100, you're going to be REFRAD. The risk that the Army Reserve runs when we do this in aggregate, same with promotion, if in the bottom 100, if that's a number that we'd go with. If in the bottom 100, the majority of officers there are logistics or AG, then we have probably just ruined that career fair for maybe a year or so. That's the risk that we run but we have, the largest percentage of positions are O1 alpha, meaning branch and material anyway, so it shouldn't have as bad of an impact as you would think that it would have. The enlisted soldiers have, the AGRs have had in this past year called the QSP board. It's the same thing as a REFRAD board, they're just called a different name. But they've had the exact same process, and this is the first year that they had the QSP board for the enlisted soldiers. One of the changes that we made from last year's board, we made two major changes from last year's board. The first one was this year will be the first time we're considering officers who have less than 18 years active federal service, and we're also considering officers who have service obligation. If a soldier just PCS, they will still be considered. The way the system will work is that by the time they have the results are out, they would have probably have already had 1 year time on station, which means they would have served that obligation anyway. And if a soldier has used tuition assistance, we will still consider that soldier. And if that soldier is elected, officer is elected for REFRAD, selected for REFRAD, then they can either pay the money, they will have to either pay the money back, serve the obligation in another status, meaning that they can go to the TPU and serve that obligation. I won't use the word locked in because I'm always careful using that word because there's still room to separate soldiers with more than 18 years. But as it relates to this board, officers who are identified for REFRAD and have more than 18 or more years of service will stay in until they reach 20 years commission service, 20 years active federal service. And at that date, they will be REFRAD from the AGR program. Officers can stay in the AGR program 9 months after the Chief Army Reserve signs results of the board. And let me clarify one thing. We call this a REFRAD board because we say you're going to be released from active duty. Officers will have the option to either retire or release from active duty. And I point that out because if an officer chooses to be released from active duty, they can still go into the TPU, IR, IMA, and continue to serve.